Welcome to the Northern Outer Banks Podcast. From wild horses to small town legends, this is where stories, history, nature, and everyday life come together. Each episode is a front porch conversation with the people and places that give this stretch of North Carolina its soul. Whether you've been coming here for years or just found it on a map, pull up a chair. You're in for a good story. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Northern Outer Banks Podcast. My name is Miles Daniels, and it is a privilege to welcome with us today Megan Agresto, lightkeeper of the Currituck Beach Lighthouse, one of the most iconic landmarks on the Northern Outer Banks. Welcome, Megan. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So we were talking earlier, you've been the lightkeeper for how many years?
We started in 2005, which gets us through 21 summer seasons just now.
21 summer seasons, and this is a big year for you and your team and the lighthouse. 150
years of light.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to what year again was the lighthouse built? I'm terrible at math.
So 1875.
1875.
It's illuminated.
It was illuminated. One of four, I think, lighthouses: Body Island, Cape Hatteras, Ocracoke, and Currituck Beach Lighthouse. Give us a little bit of the history. Why was the lighthouse built? Why was it built where it's currently located and has remained? We know we moved the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse years ago, but this one has remained intact and where it was originally built. Why was it built there, and what's some of the history that our listeners may not know about the lighthouse?
Sure. So actually, the Currituck Beach Lighthouse is the last tall brick and mortar lighthouse to be built on the entire East Coast. Right? We illuminate the last dark space between Maine and Florida. My theory on that is because Cape Henry is actually the first. It's a Hamilton lighthouse, right? It's the first of the United States of America to be built. That's the Chesapeake Bay. Really important for commerce. We're not that far south of the Chesapeake Bay, if you think about it, even though it's a different state and we don't get there easily. Mm-hmm. But if you were trying to prevent wrecks, Chesapeake Bay is a good place to prevent them and to guide people to deep water. Currituck Beach Lighthouse warns people. It's not a welcoming tower. It's a red light flashing originally lighthouse. It's a red brick tower, one of only maybe two ever built by the United States of America that was unpainted, and was really meant to keep people from finding their way to the graveyard of the Atlantic. Right? Just keep moving, don't die. But other like Ocracoke and Cape Henry, which are shorter, people are already in an inlet or a bay or a harbor. And so that's just meant to guide them there to safer water. We're a very tall lighthouse, and we're not welcoming anyone. We have to be tall enough to keep you away.
How tall again?
To the tip of the top is 162 feet tall.
So
shorter than Hatteras, one step taller than Body Island Lighthouse.
One step taller than Body Island.
They're 219.
For those listening in more urban areas, cities, probably about 15 stories, I would say.
Not that. I think probably 10, like officially, yeah.
Officially 10, okay. What makes it unique? You know, if you're visiting for the first time, what makes it truly different? You described some of that, but from the rest of the other lighthouses here on the Outer Banks.
So what stands out to everybody is that it's red brick. In fact, a lot of times they presume, or they don't spend a lot of time thinking what the other ones are made out of, because we're so clearly the brick lighthouse, right? They just forget that both Body and Hatteras are just painted brick. In fact, Hatteras right now is red brick. It's lost all of its paint. And so it looks like it's copying us, which we love. Because, of course, everybody loves Cape Hatteras, America's lighthouse. So in our case, the red brick pops. We are the last lighthouse that stands, or the last tall brick mortar lighthouse that stands out. We also, interestingly, even though we're a twin architecturally to a lot of other lighthouses, Body Island is the first on this sort of classical conical lighthouse with the oil house in front with the chimneys to be built. And then it's built in many other spots of different heights in America, including St. Augustine and Pigeon Point in California. We're, along with Morris Island Lighthouse in Charleston, the last to be built, but we're the only of all these twins to have this elliptical brick walkway that we have, to the point that we got some PhD from SCAD to come and be like, I've studied walkways in all of the planet, and yours is fabulous, and there's none other like it. So we felt lucky that in some ways, because the Currituck Beach Lighthouse has enough space between the ocean and the sound to build on, unlike a lot of other lighthouses that are built right on the water, there was room for some elegance. And you see that all both inside and outside. Really probably the most important point of all of this is 1875 in December is just one small month away from 1876, which is not only when our keeper's house is finished, and a lot of other keepers' houses that are twins, that is in fact the centennial year of the United States of America. This is a federal project. They're fully aware that this is a fabulous, high-cost project, and we're going to brag about it, and we're going to display it at the Expo in Philadelphia that year. So that really sets us apart in some ways from Body, to whom we're a twin, because it's the centennial year.
Interesting. I did not know that. So 1875, and what makes, we often hear graveyard of the Atlantic. What is it that makes this stretch of the coastline so treacherous and dangerous for ships? And why is that lighthouse, why was it so important, especially then in 1875?
There's a couple of things that make it treacherous. The Gulf Stream, people really want to use the Gulf Stream if they're going north and avoid it if they're going south. So then they'll hug the coast. And that plus sand. I mean, you just don't know where sand is going to go or how it's going to move or when it's going to run you aground. I mean, this is one of my favorite points, is that to graduate from UNC Chapel Hill, you have to know how to swim. You have to pass the swim test, because in World War I, they say, I don't know whether this is absolutely true or not, but we were always told, UNC lost so many people to drowning in World War I that we would not to enemy fire, that we've decided that was no longer appropriate. But that's also true of mariners, right? You grew up, you left your small town, you got on a ship at age 14, lied about your age, said you were whatever, and off you went. And then you encounter trouble. You might just not lose your life for any other reason except for that you can't swim once you're off that ship. So that is certainly a risk on the graveyard, along with terrible storms that just won't let you off for days. I mean, even the summer 2025 was the windiest freaking summer. That northeast wind would not stop. I loved it because it keeps the bugs away.
Right.
But I didn't even take my little skiff out one time, because all it does is blow. So if you end up with a problem offshore and that wind doesn't stop blowing, so you've got the sand, you've got currents that you're trying to avoid, you've got wind, you've got storms that blow up unexpectedly. So it turns out there's also a graveyard of the Pacific, which I didn't know until recently.
I didn't know that either. That's interesting. So you're lightkeeper there, and obviously your role in terms of managing the operation side of the lighthouse is very different than the families who came before you. Before, it was an iconic landmark for visitors and tourists who visit the northern Outer Banks. What should visitors know about those families who lived and worked at the lighthouse? What was their daily routine like? I'm sure there was or maybe there was an application process. Obviously, you weren't applying online for this. How did you become a lightkeeper, and what was the day-to-day like? So
you became a lighthouse keeper, as far as we can tell, because you knew somebody, right? And then you were related to someone. The interesting thing about lighthouse keeping is all of our lighthouse keepers didn't necessarily think of themselves as light keepers of the Currituck Beach Lighthouse. They worked for the federal government, and they went where they were sent, right? So we had lighthouse keepers who served at 14 different lighthouses, right? So they would spend 3 years. There was one keeper who served his entire service at the Currituck Beach Lighthouse. But other than that, most people come, they bring their family. That's one of the great things, actually, about the Currituck Beach Lighthouse, is that families, were mandated to come. If you were stationed at the lighthouse, you brought your family. But at least it wasn't in the middle of the water on one of these bachelor piled lighthouses in the middle of a river, right? Where you and two other guys were rotating on and off, right? So it was on land. There, by the 1890s, there's a school there's a chapel, and there's a post office, which is a big difference from 1876 when everyone was sailing across the Currituck Sound for all of those things. And the bar, we do lose a lighthouse keeper because he gets in a drunken brawl coming back over from Currituck. But for the most part, that makes what is eventually called Corolla. Like Corolla doesn't get named Corolla till the 1890s, but it's what makes it a chosen destination. We can see lighthouse keeper Johnson is actually at Cape Henry, and he writes to the inspector and says, please send me to Currituck. I've got kids there. It takes them 6 miles to go to school. Let me move just down the beach to Corolla where there's a school. So that was really a draw. You're on land, you bring your family, and your kids can get an education and not have to go over and board with somebody.
So what was the day-to-day like for that?
Oh, yeah. So the lighthouse keeper himself is really what is night to night like, right? What does my life look like? I sleep. What did they look like?
Right.
They slept in the daytime, right?
Exactly.
So there would be 3 lighthouse keepers at our lighthouse at any given time, and 2 would be on duty in the night. So the first lighthouse keeper, whoever he was, whether he was the principal or an assistant, would go up half an hour before sunset and with a match, light a lamp, that was full originally with lard oil and then kerosene. And that had to stay lit all night, of course. But a white burning light is not going to distinguish you from body or Hatteras, right? You have to be distinct. So in our case, we had a Fresnel lens. We still do a first order Fresnel lens that was fixed rotating light. So they had to deal and watch the machinery for that, which was like a grandfather clock with a governor and a weight. So you would crank the weight up, you would release it as it fell down into that pit on the first floor of the lighthouse. The pulling of the cable would move gears, which would move wheels, which moved 3 bullseye. So the Fresnel lens has all sorts of prisms, but at that point, the middle section would rotate 360 degrees, and that would have these bullseyes every third spot with a red light in front of it. And so that had to keep moving. They had to crank it every 2.5 hours to make sure the light was lit. At midnight, the first guy would go down, the second guy would come up, keep that moving all night long. So that initially we had 85 seconds of white and 5 seconds of a red light that you could watch come at you and then spin around. And that was what made Currituck Beach Lighthouse unique at night. So Body Island Lighthouse, we know those keepers were much luckier. They just had to light their lamp, and it was white all night long. And so every lighthouse, well, now I just gave you the example of Body, for which it's not true, but every lighthouse had to have a flash pattern that made it unique. And then you're sailing, you look at your charts, and you can tell with your stopwatch, sailing, you, the captain, be like, oh, wait, 5 seconds of red light, I'm at Currituck. Watch out, no land ho. We need to go up further north if we're going into the Chesapeake Bay. By the time the Currituck Beach Lighthouse is built, also the Intracoastal Waterway, like all of it is built, right? So the Albemarle and Chesapeake Canal, I mean, not just the Dismal Swamp, but the ANC Canal is already going through. Currituck Canal is already built. In fact, the building of Currituck Canal is what created Long Point Island. They dug through the land, created Long Point Island, which had what became the depot for building Hatteras and Body and Currituck, and then eventually became a light station all of its own. It's right off Barco now. Right? They got it through the Currituck Canal, but if you're on the mainland and go to Frog Island, let's say, and turn down that road, the island's right there.
Wow. How many visitors a year would you say on average?
That walk onto our site, I would say 300,000.
300,000.
I think lots of people just come to take a picture. And we're happy for that to happen.
Yeah, beautiful photo.
Absolutely.
Breathtaking view at the top. I mean, one of the most beautiful views on the outer.
But also literally because it's 220 steps to get there.
Right. It's a workout.
It is a little bit of a workout. But some people just come to go shopping. We have a little shop right there on site. Some people just come take a picture. But 70 to 80,000 go up every year and go to the top, walk around, hang out. We're very unlike the other lighthouses on the other. We're very accessible, right? We're open every day, 9 to 5, middle of March to December 1st. because that's our birthday. So that's our last day. That's always a free climb.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Everybody always got December 1st, always a free climb. But this year with a little bit of more of a party since we're going to have sparklers.
Yeah, it's a big year.
And maybe cake. It is a big year. But what was I going to say? 220 to the top. I don't know. Forgot what I was going to tell you.
It's okay. It's beautiful. That's the point.
There you
If
go.
you climb that high, it must be.
And actually, that's an interesting point. We've had a whole crew of people this year who are climbing every day because I set a challenge that said, if you can climb 150 times this year, I'll give you a prize because I opened my mouth without thinking.
So these are all local.
These are all locals, friends, and they come. There's a whole bunch of them who are there every day, 9 a.m.
That's a workout.
Yeah.
I wonder.
They are. They already said they're in better shape than they've been
I'm
in a long time.
There's no doubt. Well, you've been at this a while now. Is there, especially for a first-time visitor, is there maybe a sound or a view or the feel of the brick that you would encourage first-time visitors to just slow down and notice as you're entering or as you're walking up or once you get to the top of the lighthouse?
A lot of people think, can you let me in at sunrise? I just want to see the place at sunrise. No, false. If you want to see the lighthouse at sunrise, you go to the beach, right? Because the sun is rising from the east, which is a little bit confusing because people think, why are you on the other side of the road? But of course, the road was built after the lighthouse was built. The lighthouse was actually built as far away from the ocean as it was allowed to be because it's so tall and the light shines so far that we still shine 18 nautical miles. We didn't need to deal with erosion, which was already a known menace at the time.
As happened with Cape Hatteras.
Right. Exactly. So you don't, in fact, want to try to stand on site at sunrise because the sun is shining. You can't get on that side of the road that well. That's all National Register property, and it's been growing and growing. So you actually want to come see the lighthouse and the glowing red brick much closer to sunset because we have property that's open on the west side of the tower. And a lot of people, if they just happen there or decide to get married on site, are glad they did it as the sun was setting on the tower.
That's good insight. I didn't even think of that, but it makes complete sense. How long did it take to build that?
That's a great question. About 18 months.
18 months.
I know, it seems crazy. In fact, we make people sign a waiver that says, you should know this is built before modern day building codes, not because it's not going to stand the test of time, because of course, 5'7" of brick. When people start having panic attacks, I'm like, hit it. It's not going to fall. Push on it real hard. But there are other things, in fact, like handrails and exit signs that don't exist today that we love and we leave it without. But people do get nervous when I say 18 months, but I don't want people to get nervous when I say 18 months. It's very well built. Believe it or not, there's actually an airspace. When you look at the outside of the lighthouse and the angle of that cone, it's a different angle than the interior cone because there's an entire airspace for insulation that was built inside that tower. So it's actually two cones built at different angles all the way around. Anyway, how did I start talking about that one part of the lighthouse?
No, we were... Go ahead.
Well, no, just that there are all sorts of... No, never mind. That wasn't...
We were talking about how long it took to build the lighthouse.
So 1873, Congress appropriates money. Really 1872, and I wrote a whole article about an Elizabeth City guy, actually, who Congressman Clinton Cobb gets money for all of the lighthouse, and people love him. Then he tragically dies of illness at 37. Such a handsome man. I want us all to go look at my little article that I wrote about Clinton Cobb. So he's to thank, but there's some debate about whether that happened at the end of 1872 or the beginning of 1873. So usually I say Congress appropriates money, 1873. They purchase the property. You have to go through the whole title and all of that. By the end of 1873, they move a working party on site. June 19th, 1874, they drive the pilings, which turns out to be, I think, 214 or 216 pilings, and go from there. So that's June, pile driving starts, and by actually August of 1875, the build is complete, the lens is in place, they're just tinkering in order to get it ready because they've already put out a notice to mariners about the light to be illuminated on December 1st. They set it way in advance. But then, of course, they have to make sure it happens. And so they bring in lighthouse keepers a couple of weeks before that to get them trained on the lens and the rotation of the lens. So 18 months is what I usually say.
18 months. What's one common misconception about lighthouses or this one in particular that you'd like to clear up for
The
for our
one that
listeners?
people always think is, why did you build it in the forest? Not you, Megan, but like, why was it built in the forest? Because, of course, it wasn't. It was built on the beach. That was beach, right? We've never been moved, and that is the original site. But it's not until, right, the way I think about the Outer Banks is, was it before the Wright brothers brought attention to the Outer Banks or after the Wright brothers brought attention to the Outer Banks? Because we're just subsistence living beforehand, right?
Right.
Then Wright brothers come. Then we get a national monument.
Early
then we get
1900s.
infrastructure.
Right,
Yeah, so
right.
1903 they fly, right? But we don't get the national monument till the 1920s, and there's a bunch of reasons why that makes sense historically. But once you get the infrastructure in, then you have to protect your infrastructure. So then you have to build dunes, right? So the WPA comes in the 1930s and is in Corolla in 1940, building all those dunes. Once you build the dunes, you've made a big effort to avoid washover, right? Our lighthouse can handle washover. If you look at our keeper's house, it's built to handle water running under it. But that's not the way once you start building roads and bridges. So then they stabilize the Outer Banks with the dunes. And once you stabilize that, you get rid of all the cattle. Once you get rid of because you need your grass to grow to hold your dunes. Once you get rid of the cattle, then trees are going to grow. And so then there's a whole reforestation project that takes place in Crawlin after the Ash Wednesday storm, where they plant the state plants like 10,000 trees around the Currituck Beach Lighthouse.
Wow.
And so people come in and are like, why did you build right here? No, we built right here because it was on the beach and it made sense. And we're still tall enough that even though sometimes you can't see the tower right from the base because there are so many trees, the whole idea, of course, was an ocean guiding tower. And none of those trees are taller than the focal plane of the lens, which is 158 feet above sea level.
Does that mean that all of the dunes in Corolla are man-made, or
Sure, the line of the beach.
The line of the
Yeah.
beach. There.
I mean, sure, if you see a ridge line somewhere else, that would be an original, a moving ridge line. But yeah, all of the dunes all the way up and down, right in front of the houses, that was all sand fence and a WPA effort.
What is it in the age of GPS and satellites, and we've got everything right here on our phone? What is it that still captures the imagination of people and makes them want to visit year after year, and not just the Currituck Beach Lighthouse, but across the Outer Banks, our beautiful lighthouses, any lighthouse?
Actually, I feel like since you went a little bit in that direction, it is worth mentioning we continue to be an active aid to navigation. But so the Coast Guard, the United States of America, still owns our lens. The nonprofit that I work for, the Outer Banks Conservationists, we own the tower, and the state of North Carolina owns the land nearby. So that's a working relationship, but all to make sure that that light still shines at night through the first order Fresnel lens. But I've spoken to the Coast Guard, and they say, look, you're essentially like a third tier. We're glad you're here. We know you're not going anywhere. We'll count on you if we need you. But it's not first line of navigational efforts, right? But still, let's say that I hadn't answered that question that way. What is it that still makes people want to come to the lighthouse, right? Part of it, believe it or not, is that the lens is still in there. If you go look at a lighthouse that doesn't have a lens, it looks naked. It looks soulless somehow. So we're very lucky that we're allowed to keep that first order lens in it. But all that, it has to do certainly with humans wanting to fly, right? I want to get high enough up. I want to see the ocean. I want to see the view. Plus, lighthouses are always near water. Water always makes people feel better or good or energized. All of those things say, let me go in, right? All we have to do is put one person at the top of that lighthouse for any reason, even if we're closed. And suddenly everyone is like, may I, please, let me in. I'd love to go up. Just, it invites curiosity. And it always did. Lighthouse keepers, on their rules of what they had to do, was welcome the public and educate them about it.
So even then,
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was more of a modern in terms of tourism and being an attraction.
Oh no! If you just showed up in 1890 and were nearby, in fact, in the newspapers all the time they talk about the very generous Keeper Austin, let's say, who let us in and showed us around and showed us the house. It was all, in some ways, I do think it's true for all lighthouses, but they're all curiosity. You just want to see inside. Mm-hmm. And then once you're inside, you're like, I also want to see from the top. Mm-hmm. That is timeless.
How did your kids growing up when they were asked,
Oh my gosh! Sometimes
what does
I'm like,
mom
would
do
you
for a living?
please go get a key and let our friend go climb the lighthouse? I don't want to. It's crazy. I will climb the lighthouse anytime anybody wants. They're like, hey, can I come climb the lighthouse? I'm like, let's go. Let's go. I will always climb. My kids living a great life,
Yeah.
just on the grounds of the lighthouse. But if you were actually, I think my older son wants our job one day, because there's two of us. It's me and Luis, and we
Right.
have these two kids. And I think my older son is waiting for the day that he can take over the job of lighthouse keeper.
That would be amazing.
You think so?
Well, you've been doing this a long time. What is it about? There are lots of things you could be doing in terms of your career path.
It's never boring. I might have
Is that
a
what it
person.
is?
Yeah, in my case, you would think actually, like some people move to Corolla and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't live here year round.
Year round. I mean,
But
it's
not
very
me.
different when you visit for a week or
Sure,
two.
right. I want to be in my happy
off
place,
season,
right?
Yeah. Lots
It
of
is
things are
very
closed.
different.
It snows. People don't realize it snows.
Also, Corolla has been gone through the vicissitudes of almost becoming a ghost town a whole bunch of times, right? Like lighthouse keeper, life-saving, and post office get here turn of the century. So there's real work to be done. The government's paying you. You don't have to worry about survival too much. Great. That goes on for a little while. But then all of these lighthouse keepers become electrified. 1933, all of the Coast Guard becomes the Coast Guard in 1915. And so the life-saving stations travel becomes quicker, shipping becomes quicker. We need fewer life-saving stations. So these towns slowly get fewer and fewer year-round residents, particularly Corolla. By the time you're in the 70s, I don't know, it's like a 5 families, 6 dogs. I can't remember what the quote from the Virginian pilot is at some point. But right, the school shuts down in the late 1950s. Without a school, people just move away. So Corolla had been flirting with some real Portsmouth Island feel for a while. Everyone was about to go, right? Or at least that's the way it sort of felt,
Right.
compared to today.
Which is now desolate off of Ocracoke Island.
Exactly,
right?
the island south of which nobody lives on, but used to have a life-saving
Up until
station
the
at a church.
70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then really Currituck makes a plan, right? I think it was called, in fact, the Currituck Plan, to try to get in what Kitty Hawk and Nag's Head had going on. And it was a pretty successful plan. And in fact, Corolla now, starting in the 90s, you get the Food Lion. Even during my time, we got the Harris Teeter. And now it has a little vibrancy. Then we started the school. The church gets more members. It just feels like it's really become a more vibrant year-round community also. Restaurants that stay open.
And a lot of folks don't realize we had Barbara Snowden on an episode talking about the history of the Northern Outer Banks. And a lot of our visitors don't realize it wasn't until, I think, 1984 when the state took over what is now NC-12 and paved the road. I mean, that was not that long ago.
That's right.
In terms of getting to and from.
Where you didn't have to sort of
that's
pass
really
the
when all the
guardhouse.
development happened.
Right.
The
Otherwise, you
beautiful
had to
homes.
own up there.
You had to own
up
up there, right?
Yeah.
It was a few families from Penny's Hill on down, and families who'd been there, the Austins, for example. There was a lot of just family-owned property. And then I think really the early to mid-'80s is when we really started to see.
Yeah, and I think it's slow going for a long time, yeah.
Yeah. What makes it such a unique? I mean, you sort of described it, but I think that the Northern Outer Banks is personally just one of my favorite places. It's absolutely beautiful, but you've been there a long time. You've lived there. You've raised your family there. For someone who's never visited before, the lighthouse, yes, but the area known as Corolla, the Northern Outer Banks, what makes it unique?
All of the things, right? The coming and going of the people, right? I guess that's not so much for if you're just visiting for a week. But the fact that we don't have very tall buildings said the lighthouse keeper.
Right.
Apart from that, we don't have a lot of tall buildings. So it just feels still like it's just a little seaside town. Mm-hmm. And you just can't, plus you got the wild horses north of us and big sky, but also a stand of longleaf pine. There's just a lot of nature, plus the risk that comes along with living at a beach town. So it's all beautiful and then it washes away. It's not without danger or fun. And so I don't know. I'm not sure I would retire personally to Corolla. I'd like to have enough to do that I want to be working, and I'm working all the time, but I love it.
You do love it, and there's a good reason to love Corolla. Megan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. And just one final question. As the lightkeeper, when visitors leave the Currituck Beach Lighthouse, what do you hope they carry with them?
Really, all I want, well, because I'm a person, I don't know, who remembers nothing except for whether I liked something or not. That's literally a book, a fun time, a party. Did I have a good time or not? That's all I want. I want them to have enjoyed my staff. I want them to have enjoyed what they had the capacity to learn if they wanted to. If they were like, don't teach me anything, I'm just going to climb. We want them to have just had that opportunity also. We consider ourselves self-guided for the most part, so that you can come, you can stay as long as you like, you can leave when you're done.
Awesome. And I do want to give you the opportunity for guests who are listening today. How does one is there a ticket that needs to be purchased? How does one climb the lighthouse?
That's a great question, because in fact, other lighthouses do it otherwise. You may only climb if you show up on the day you want to climb, at the time you want to climb. Talk to the person who's standing in front of the lighthouse and say, I'm here, I want to climb. And then we let you pay, sign a waiver, go on in.
Easy enough.
Easy enough.
Megan Agresto, thank you so much for being our guest on the Northern Outer Banks podcast. I'm Miles Daniels, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Here, wild horses roam windswept beaches, and the ocean stretches endlessly before you. Each sunrise brings a new adventure. Each breeze carries the salt and serenity of the sea. Climb our historic red brick lighthouse. Savor fresh seafood and North Carolina barbecue. This is more than a vacation. It's a place that renews your spirit and keeps calling you back. Where in the Outer Banks? Only in the Northern Outer Banks.